The nation is going back on vacation. Join us August 12th to August 15th when we load up a plane and go to Toronto to catch not one, but two Blue Jays baseball games and a Toronto FC game. Not only does your trip include tickets to those games, but it also includes your flight to and from Toronto, 3 nights in a downtown Toronto hotel, and your transportation to and from the airport. Plus, we will even throw in a limited edition piece of Nation gear. Join us August 12th to 15th as the nation heads to Toronto to watch a little baseball. Get all the information at nationgear.ca. Episode 11 of BLT Bets, BaggedMilk fist pumping to the beat. BaggedMilk's back on the show.
It's a good jam, man.
I just want to say, when you go on vacation, it's a big adjustment for me because we talk to each other. We do a show together every single day of the week. And then You're gone and I'm like, damn.
Yes. Mm-hmm. It was nice. It was a nice break, but good to be back. Got some betting to do.
Did you do any betting while you were on vacation?
I didn't do any betting when I was on vacation. So now the goal here is to bet my way out of the money I spent on vacation.
That's always a good strategy.
Yeah.
That's like...
I was the big V.
I mean, you probably could call it anything other than that, Liam.
Whoa. That's what I call it.
BaggedMilk, he's asking you how your vacation was.
Oh, sorry.
That's what the big V is.
Yeah, it was good, man. It was eat too much, drink too much, nice little vacay, get a little sun.
My rule on vacation, and this is probably not a good rule that people should follow, but if I go to a sporting event while I'm on vacation, however much my ticket is worth, that is how much I wager on the game. Because then if you have a good time, it's basically like you went for free. And if the bet loses, well, you're on vacation. Who cares?
Vacation money, it doesn't count. Once you're back home, it's gone.
It is.
Yeah, well, that's exactly it. So now I'm in a hole then with that in mind. So now I got to get out of the hole.
That's a good point. Like when we go to Toronto, for example, on our trip, I plan on betting heavily on the Blue Jays to win those games. And if the Jays come through for me, the trip's paid for.
Well, exactly. I mean, it's just smart living right there.
Mm-hmm. So we'll get into baseball. We'll get into F1. Those are kind of the two sports we're going to be mainly talking about now because there's literally nothing else going on. But first, Stanley Cup Final. Avs beat the Lightning in 6 games. How did we all do on our series bets?
Mine was the one that I got most excited about when we started doing it was even money for McKinnon over 27.5 shots in that series. So I went heavier than I normally would on a bet on that one. But to me, I thought it was free money and ultimately it proved to be true. So at a plus 100 for over 27.5 shots, you take that all day.
Yeah.
I didn't really even bet on it. I was just so disappointed that the Oilers were out that I just forgot and just didn't really watch that much.
I respect that. I didn't watch much of it either, to be honest. I did get my bets in though. So the McKinnon one hit for me. Palat over 4 points hit for me. Kucherov over 2.5 goals though. No bueno on that one.
Yeah, I was with you on all 3 of those. And then I also did Kucherov over 20.5 shots on goal in the series. And he had 1 through the first 2 games. And it was like, shit. But then he rattled off 6 in a couple of games. So he ended up with 6, 12, 14, 16, 17. So probably needed 1 more game out of Nikita Kucherov to hit that one. It didn't end up happening. He didn't go over 2.5 goals. So I ended up splitting on the 4 props that I put money on. But then I lost because I did wager twice on the Lightning. Once at the beginning of the series, once when they went down 1-0. So not a great run for me betting futures over the Stanley Cup playoffs. Was definitely a better regular season in the NHL.
I saw your piece on Daily Faceoff show yesterday. You want to talk about that?
Well,
how'd it go?
So a big part of my role at Daily Faceoff is to give the daily bets every day, my recommended NHL bets throughout the entire season. And my rule is if I say it on the show, I bet it myself. So I finished the year. I did my sort of year in review on the show the other day. throughout the course of the year on the Daily Faceoff show, I recommended 332 bets. Which is bananas. I ended up on the year, assuming my math is right. Don't double check me on this because my record might be off by like 3 or 4, but I went 173, 155 and 3, which is actually really good. I finished the year up 12 units or just under 12 units on the season. It's a good run.
That's not too bad. You're in the money.
Yeah, like up 12 units. I was pretty proud of that. I also went back and I looked at who I bet on the most in terms of player props throughout the season. The players who I wagered on 3 times throughout the year were Claude Giroux, Alex Ovechkin, Rope Hintz, and Gustav Nyquist, which is a weird one. The players I wagered on.
What team does he play for?
Columbus.
I didn't even know he was in the league.
He went on this run and I bet all 3 of those plays were over the course of like a week because he went on this run where he was like plus 115 to get a point and he was playing top line minutes. So I just kept betting him. I think I went 2 for 3. The players who I bet on 4 times were McDavid, Patrice Bergeron, and Nazem Kadri. And I went a perfect 4 for 4 this year betting on Nazem Kadri to get an assist. And each time, or 3 of the 4 times, it was plus money as well.
I'll be honest. I cut those clips every single day for the Daily Faceoff show. And I couldn't believe Mika Zibanejad assist wasn't on that list.
So I missed that when I did my year in review. I bet on Mika Zibanejad the most. It was 5 times this season. I bet on him to get an assist and he came through 3 times for me. But when I hit it, it was like plus 135, minus 105 and plus 120. So I did finish up money, just barely betting on Zibanejad. My most profitable player was actually Jeff Skinner, who I bet on twice, turning $100, or if you use $100 as the standard unit, $100 into $285 and $100 into $255. So on the year, I finished up 12 units and 25% of that profit is because I bet on Jeff Skinner twice in the last week of the regular season.
So like, if you think back to the start of the year, did you have a goal for kind of where you want to land, or is just kind of you made your way through it and saw how it goes?
I didn't set a goal. I started the year. So after the month of November, I was up over 15 units. Like I started so hot and in my head, I'm like, this is easy. Like I have so many games to pick from. Like I'm going to breeze through the year. And then it fell off hard.
What was a hard month for you?
January hit me hard. I was down 10.4 units. And then in February, I was down 9.4 units. So
don't call it a comeback though.
Well, so from November to February, I went from up just over 15 to down 4.3 units on the year. And then in March, I started to get back towards the end of March, though, is when I went on a heater and I was back up to plus 1.4 units on the year. And then April was my monster month, up 10.58 units. Only reason I was profitable is because I was strong in April. And I look back at what I was betting on, and there were 2 things that saved my bacon. One, I went way heavier on player props. Early in the year, I was betting on favorites to win or lose, or favorites to win, sorry. And that's what led me to get really cold in the middle of the year. Finding value in player props. And keep in mind, I spend 30 minutes to an hour every day researching these, right? Depending how many games are on the slate. Finding value in player props is 100%, in my opinion, the way to go in the NHL. Like me finding that the books were overlooking Jeff Skinner. That was huge. Finding that the books were overlooking Patrice Bergeron towards the end of the year and setting him at plus 130 to get an assist every night. And he was hitting it fairly consistently. The player props and also taking 2 monster favorites and parlaying them to win in regulation was something I had a ton of success with down the stretch as well. So I think just straight up betting favorites in hockey might not be the best way to go. And next year, I'm excited to see if I have a full season of just hammering favorites in regulation, because you need to get that extra value, I think. And also player props are probably the way to go in the NHL.
I think my betting on the NHL this year, I think that I would do a can't miss parlay for risky business at OilersNation.com every game on game days. And I think I went too heavy in favorites parlays where I would put 2, 3, 4 together to try to chase the juice a little bit.
I think once you get to 4, it's hard, eh?
Yeah, because I would also ultimately I'd be like, I'd hit 3 and then miss 1. It was a lot of that. So I think that next year when I do that again, I'm going to tone it down to what I'm looking at for my parlays.
It's funny you say about the player props because we've spoke about this almost every episode, but the Draisaitl throughout the playoffs.
Yeah.
Plus money every game. He's hitting every game. I mentioned it a few weeks ago too, the Adam Fox thing where his points are like minus 180, but his assists, which he doesn't score goals, are like minus 120. You know, like I agree that I think there's way more value in trying to dig through the player props a little bit, and just if you know the game, then you should be able to find them pretty easily, rather than betting like minus 150 on the Oilers to beat Seattle, whoever it is.
Yeah, and again, you need to know the trends as well and know when to hop in or out of a trend. And that was something that was a bit of a learning curve for me too when it came to betting on props. It's like, okay, you look at a guy who has assists in 4 straight games. Okay, that's probably not a spot to hit because, you know, one, by that point, the books are probably catching up to it. And also, he's due for a game where he doesn't get one. That's the way hockey works. No one's rattling off assists in like 8 or 9 straight games, right? So eventually that trend's going to end. But the thing I had success with, actually, and this is why I was hitting Zibanejad so much because this kept popping up, I would find guys who've hit it in like 7 or 8 of their last 10 games, but are coming off a game where they didn't get it. And trying to like get them on that sort of bounce back game is something I had a lot of success with. Same thing with goal scoring and a guy like Ovechkin in that middle part of the season where he started to cool off a little bit. You'd find a stretch where it's like, okay, he hasn't scored in like 3 games and the books are putting him down at plus 110 now. And it's like, okay, well, just hammer it because like Ovi's going to score eventually. So it takes time to kind of like comb through shit. And maybe that's part of the reason why next year I'll start like doing more of a dedicated daily blog for like player props, right? Like if I'm sitting there combing through shit, I'll put it out there. Cause I think if you can dig through the data and dig through the info every day, there's like money to be made on that.
What about now that we're in the middle of baseball season? What are you looking at when it comes to betting on the Jays or just beyond?
Man, it's Jays parlayed with their team total. Like this team does not win low scoring games. If you're going to bet on them to win, just parlay it with them over 4.5 runs. Like their last like 5-6 wins. Beat the Red Sox, scored 6. Beat the Red Sox, scored 7. Scored 9 in a win against the Brewers. 9 in a win against the White Sox. 10 in a win against the Yankees. 7, 11, 6, 10, 7, 8, 8, and 7. Those are how many runs they've scored in their wins in the month of June. 12 as well against Minnie. Like all they do when they win, it's because their bats come alive. So they're not a team that's going to win low scoring games. So that's something I'm still having success with. I'm not betting on them every game, but when I do, you use the bet builder or the same game parlay, courtesy of our friends at PointsBet Canada, and you just take them with over 4.5 runs and you're set, and your payouts in plus money, even if they're favorites.
Liam, basketball's over, hockey's over. What are you looking at these days?
I'm kind of on the baseball train too when I am betting daily. Like what I try and do is similar to what Tyler said, but I do it on teams. Like the Dodgers are always a good team to do it on. Like they just are always such heavy favorites. So if you just bet the run line, but then do the team total in runs of like 3.5, 4, you can usually get it to like plus 150. And I think you can just do that with all the favorites around the league when they're heavy favorites against teams and they're hitting like fairly often for me. I think that's a good way to go. While even like baseball too, like I know you spoke about in the NHL, the favorites maybe aren't as likely to win, but if you have a good pitcher on a good team playing against a bad team, like the A's or whoever it is, like if you just combine a few of those together, like I found those have been pretty successful for me too. But we are in the dog days of betting, to say the least. Yeah. And F1 is where I'm pretty much putting my money. I actually had a pretty good week last week in F1. Did you manage to watch the race?
I watched the race, yeah, but it was so I was out for a wedding in BC. So the nice part about it was on the Sunday of the wedding. So it was later in the afternoon. I was worried about it at first when I saw that it was on the Sunday, but I did get to watch the race. I did get to see how it played out. So I'm looking forward to the British Grand Prix this weekend.
Yes, I think a British Grand Prix is a lot faster from what I hear. Like it's a pretty speedy track. The Canadian Grand Prix, though, I thought it was pretty fun. I thought it was a good one. There was a lot that was going on. Like guys were falling out of the race like fairly often, which I guess like you don't want to see like guys do that, especially when you bet on them, like Mick Schumacher. That poor guy. That guy literally cannot catch a break. Yeah. I don't know what he has to do anymore to get a point in a race, but he's actually doing well. What did he finish? Like 6th or something like that. I think he started like P6. I think and then he's like something racing around. He's actually doing really well, like halfway through the race, and all of a sudden, engine failure. Yeah. Not even like, it wasn't even his fault. And I put money on him to get points. Shouldn't have listened to myself, because I bet on him every single. I've lost money on Mick Schumacher 9 weeks in a row, and I just want to believe. And this week I will believe again at plus 250 to score points.
Looking at the Canadian Grand Prix, I actually did put one bet in that hit. The odds were low. I had Leclerc finishing top 10 because he started at the back of the pack because he got that penalty. So he ended up finishing in 5th place. So I did win that, but the odds weren't great there. But, a win's a win. You take them.
It's money at the end of the day. Have you looked at what you're going to do for this week's race? Oh, another one I had was Ocon to finish in the top 6, which hit. He finished 6th, but I was really worried for the last 10 laps of the race because Alonso was right on his tail.
Yeah.
And he was asking to pass Ocon because he was faster, but it just kind of didn't work out because of how close Bottas was. And I was legit sweating it out for those last 10 laps. So, okay, I've already lost my Mick one. So if I can get the Ocon one, at least I'll come out on plus. And I got it. And I felt kind of bad for Fernando too, but I'm not sure what to expect considering he started second. He was never going to win the race. They're just not fast enough at all. So I was hoping he could maybe squeak out a podium. It's always cool to see different guys get on there, but 7th or whatever he did. It was a really good finish for Alpine.
Yeah, it was. Looking at this week, the qualifying obviously hasn't happened yet, so it's a little bit tricky to put some bets down. But it's hard to see Max Verstappen to win at plus 100 and just be maybe a little sprinkle before we even get going here. I don't know. Again, this is my first season really digging into F1, so I don't know how he's generally performed at the British Grand Prix historically. But when you see plus 100 on Max Verstappen to win early on, well, I'm intrigued by that.
I know last year he left the race because Hamilton won. I think he got in a collision with something and left the race. But how can you not bet on Max? We said it when we previewed the Canadian Grand Prix too. Even money for a guy who's literally winning every single race.
Yeah. And
everyone else around him is just falling apart. I think it's a pretty good one. I'm looking at some of the British guys to do well, Lando Norris right here is plus 120 to finish in the top 6. I might do that. I know McLaren's not been great, but I always feel as if you've almost got to bet on those hometown guys to perform where they are. The one race they get a year back there. And I could see that. I don't see Lewis doing anything too crazy. Maybe a podium finish, but I could see him just finishing top 6 and then George Russell just locking him for a top 5 finish. It doesn't matter. It's free money, honestly.
It is
every single race.
One I'm looking at specifically, like you just said, it's the British Grand Prix coming up this weekend. George Russell right now, I'm looking at a top 3. So if he podiums, it's plus 300. I'm intrigued by that because like you said, he's finished top 5 every race so far. So maybe this is the one he sneaks in there, right?
Yeah.
I'm still gun shy on Ferrari, although I'm looking at Charles Leclerc to win qualifying at minus 118. I'm like, well, he's qualifying is his Grand Prix lately. So maybe that's a move there as well.
He's missed a Saturday, the label you don't really want, but he's done well.
Not the one you want.
No. I like the Russell one actually, because last week too, it kind of felt like he was letting Lewis get ahead of him a little bit because of Lewis had a pretty tough week with the porpoising and stuff. And we're saying how bad the Mercedes car was. I think he might have even labeled it as the worst car he's ever drove and then finished 3rd in the Grand Prix. So take that for what it is, but that might be a good one. The one I like a lot just because of how well they've done recently is Alpine to both cars to finish in points is minus 120. There's not a ton of juice behind it, but is hitting 3 or 4 races. So that's where I would go. And of course, Mick. You got to bet on Mick until he does it.
How about this one then? If you're doing a head-to-head, Mick Schumacher versus Kevin Magnuson is a plus 150 if you're going head-to-head.
But I don't know. I guess Magnuson hasn't really been doing that well either. He hasn't recently. Really.
I had both of those guys in my DraftKings I had a couple of different lineups. And it did not go well for me, Liam.
Magnuson had a tough one last week too. I can't even remember what happened properly. Like, wasn't it a pit thing or something like that?
Yeah, it was something like that. But he ended up finishing in 17th, which was dead last amongst the people that actually finished the race.
Even Latifi finished ahead of him.
Yes. Nick Latifi finished 1 spot ahead of him. So not an ideal finish, to say the least.
No, I saw a big thing on Latifi. Actually, there was a big TikTok trend that they wanted everybody to vote for Latifi to finish driver of the day, but somehow didn't even finish in the top 5. So I don't know. I don't know about driver of the day. I'm not a fan of it because it's never actually the right person who should win it. It's just like the guy who wins the race, basically. Or Leclerc won it because he went from 19th to 6th or 5th or whatever he was. But it's like almost expected that he does that. So, but yeah, I guess not enough love for Latifi.
No love for Latifi, although it was interesting. Even just, I know this has nothing to do with betting, but watching him, obviously it was the Canadian Grand Prix. So he's being interviewed about it, blah, blah, blah. And then one of the first questions he was asked as I was watching the pregame show was just, hey, are you going to be back with Williams next year? Because they're looking for a driver apparently. And he's just like, no. So yeah. If you could bet, if you're feeling fresh on Latifi, and you should be maybe plus 500,000 to win. So that's as far as you talked about disrespectful bets early in the NHL playoffs. Like that is a disrespectful bet.
The Latifi revenge tour is alive and well. He didn't finish last in a race. So maybe second, third last next week. Like who knows? Could be anything with that guy. Might even crash in the formation lap like he did in Monaco.
Yes. Excellent. Excellent. I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to the race this weekend. It's going to be nice to see. It's an 8 a.m. start here, 8 a.m. Mountain. So a little bit early, but not too early. I like that.
Not too early. One other thing I wanted to talk about really quickly was the Bob McKenzie effect. Yes. So yesterday, Bob McKenzie and Daily Faceoff's Chris Peters has been on this almost half the season. So Shane Wright is number 2 on Bob McKenzie's draft list now.
Yeah.
And what's his name? Yuri Slavkovsky, I think that's how you say it.
Yeah.
Is number 1 on his list. So when we spoke a couple of weeks ago, Shane Wright was the absolute clear favorite to go first overall. I think it was even like minus 2,500 or something crazy like that, wasn't it? It was like not even worth betting on.
No.
Now he's minus 250 and Slavkovsky is plus 175. So I wanted to throw that out there.
What's interesting, so this actually popped up the day before the McKenzie rankings came out and it caught my attention. And then when the McKenzie rankings came out, I was like, damn, like they knew something we didn't. I'm so intrigued by this because right now I'm seeing Shane Wright on PointsBet Canada at minus 200. I just can't see the Habs in their own building walking up to that stage and not taking the Canadian kid. And I guess if there's anyone who's going to do it, it's an American-born president of hockey ops and Jeff Gorton, who might be sitting there going, no, I don't care about him being Canadian. We're taking the best player. And maybe they view that as Juraj Slavkovsky. But I have a hard time thinking they won't take Shane Wright.
I wonder too if... What are we going to do on the betting?
Yeah, what are you going to do with that, Tyler?
I think I'm going to bet Shane Wright, but I think if I wait a couple more days, I might get him at like minus 150.
I was thinking that too. Like, I think like this is only a day and the odds have gone down drastically. So I have a feeling that if we kind of just wait this thing out a little bit, a couple of days, maybe give it the weekend, people talk about it a little bit more. Could we see Shane Wright get to even money, do you think?
I don't think it'll go that far. I think Shane Wright will always be the favorite. The thing with Mackenzie's ranking that makes it interesting is it's not Bob's opinion, right? It's him surveying NHL scouts. But a point that Frank or Chris Peters brought up, on the Daily Faceoff show was, we don't know if he talks to a Montreal Canadiens scout. Also, we don't really know how close it was either. Like, this could be 6 scouts had Slavkovsky at 1, 4 had, or even less than that. It could be 5 had Slavkovsky, 4 had Wright, 1 had Cooley. That's close. And if it's shifting the odds this much, like even minus 200, if you're going to bet $100 on that, you're only making 50, but I think this is a really good spot to just hammer Shane Wright.
I think he goes 1.
Me too.
For 2 reasons. One, I think Montreal need help right now with players. And I think Shane Wright can go straight into the lineup and play. And I don't think Slavkovsky, if he gets drafted first overall, plays in the NHL next season. Do you think that too? Or what do you think on that?
Yeah, I'm not sure if any of these 3 play. I wouldn't be surprised if they sent Shane Wright back.
I wouldn't either. And I think they would, because now the pressure is off on taking first overall picks after what Buffalo did with Owen Power and saw how effective it was. Like, he was pretty good when he played. So, and I do think Shane Wright still has a little bit to prove in the OHL. Mm-hmm. Like, I think he still has a little bit there to left behind.
He had a great year, but he didn't have a usual first overall pick year.
And then he didn't even even at the World Juniors, like Connor Bedard was a star, not Shane Wright. Like, was Shane Wright top 5 player on that team?
Yeah.
I just think close. Of when McDavid, for example, like when he was in the World Juniors, like he was super noticeable. And obviously they only played 4 or 5 games. So it's a little bit different, but that would be one reason. And my second reason is like what you said, like he's Canadian. Like Montreal haven't drafted first overall for a long time, right?
Long time.
Yeah.
Have they ever? They have to. They would have back in the 70s. I think they took someone.
Yeah. I can't think of anyone off the top of my head, but I don't know. I just don't see anything like that changing in the sense of we're not going to take Shane Wright and Canadian kid, home built. Could you imagine? What do you think I don't even know if the reaction would be disappointment, because I think Slavkovsky's obviously a good player, but I think shock is probably a good word. I almost wanted to happen to see the reaction live in the building, which you'll be at.
I will be there. Yes. I'm really intrigued, man. I think it'll be Shane Wright, but clearly there are a lot of scouts who don't think that way. So we'll see how it plays out. The draft is interesting. The other thing, I talked about this on one of the real life podcasts the other day. Connor McDavid didn't win the Hart Trophy. Austin Matthews did. I think there is no denying after watching the playoffs. Who the best player in the world is and who's most valuable to his team. And I think it's Connor McDavid. I think this year was just Matthews scored 60. That hasn't been done in a long time. You need to show respect to that. He had a great season. A little bit of voter fatigue from always having McDavid in the mix. Matthews won. That's cool. I would imagine McDavid opens the year around even money to win the Hart Trophy next season. Even if it's minus 120, hammer it. Hammer it the first sight you get of it. You don't even have to read McDavid on the odds board. As soon as you see Connor, click it, bet it. He's winning the Hart Trophy next year. There's no way he's not winning the Hart Trophy in 22-23.
Do you think he'll be the favorite though?
He will. I think he will. I think there's no way they don't put him as the favorite, just because I think if they don't, there'll be a slew of money coming in. If Matthew scores 60 again next year, it'll be that's great. You did it again. But the wow factor is gone from it, right? It's not wow, first player. It'll be okay, back-to-back 60 goal seasons. Legendary shit. He's the best goal scorer in the league, no doubt. But I think the carryover of the hype from McDavid leading the playoffs and scoring without playing in the finals, along with, again, a year off from people not voting him, I think we'll get to the point next year where it's it's McDavid's league again. Don't worry about it.
I think that's a good point, actually. the hype from the playoffs. And I also think a big reason why McDavid didn't win it this year, obviously, like you said, the 60 points and 100 points from 60 goals, 100 points from Matthews, crazy numbers. Rightfully so, he deserved to win that trophy, which firstly, I thought it was whack, the backlash that I got on Twitter.
Yeah.
I don't really know what people expected. Secondly, it seems like a reason why he didn't win was because the Oilers were kind of in and out of the playoffs for that part of the season, right? Like they weren't a consistent good team throughout. Mm-hmm. This year, I think they'll be consistently good throughout the entire year. Like Woodcroft's going to be there. And we just saw what happened with him. It wasn't just like a 10-game span of like, oh, they got a new coach. This is what it is. This is this team now. Like they went to the conference finals, which is the disrespect of that, I think, is nuts. And no one's talking about them being a really good team again next season. And I also think, too, we don't even know who McDavid's line mates are going to be. Like, is Kane going to be back? Like, will it be Puljujarvi? Like, we don't know. Like, there could be two fresh faces next to him. So I wonder how much that adds into it. It's like, oh, well, he's playing with this guy and this guy now. Like, but he still managed to score 120 points. Whether with Matthews, it's like, oh, well, he did it with Marner again.
Yeah, that's fair.
So, yeah, I like the McDavid one to win. And, yeah, that's the one I would go with for sure. McDavid, lock and loaded.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I think that's the spot. I'm also excited to see next year, like the early McDavid player props too. Like, how are they going to adjust from him being so dominant in the playoffs? Like, what are the pricings going to be on the first 5 games of the year for McDavid to go over 1.5 points? Because I think it'll be like borderline hilarious to see.
I can't remember what this was, but what was the player season prop last year? Did he hit it or just miss?
He just missed. It was 126.5.
Do you think that lowers? Or do you think it goes up after his playoffs?
I think it'll stay the same. I think because he didn't hit it, that's like one thing. Yeah, I think it stays the same. And
then a quick one. Matthews goal prop.
65, 60.5, 59.5. I think I think again, you have to remember, because it's Leafs fans betting, right? So I think if you don't set it, unless that's how they try to trap people into making the bet, right? Like you set it at 55.5 and go a little low, that, he's usually hurt once a year, maybe.
Or suspended.
Yes.
Yeah, that's why I brought up the if you think McDavid would be 1, because I wonder if that Leafs like fans picking so much for Matthews to win, I wonder if they would make Matthews the favorite. That would be my reason. Maybe. Like, I think McDavid should be the favorite, but that's why I would think he would maybe be second.
I mean, is there any reason why the Leafs should be right with the Lightning for Stanley Cup odds next year? Probably not. Who's number 1? Is it still Colorado? Colorado's plus 450, and then it jumps all the way down to plus 900, Tampa, Toronto.
I don't have it in front of me. Do you have it right there?
Yeah, I got it.
Who's second in the West?
It's, do you want to take a guess?
Vegas.
It's Vegas.
Yeah, which I don't get. They didn't make the playoffs this year. Injuries or not, that team should have made the playoffs, and they didn't.
Plus 1,200 is Vegas. It's interesting to see how heavy in the East it is, right? It goes Colorado 1, then it's Tampa, Toronto, Florida, Carolina, and then Vegas at 12-1. Like, how is Vegas at 12-1 and the New York Rangers are 16-1? I know we talked about this a little bit, but like, why are the Rangers getting disrespected? This team went to the conference finals. Check. They can do it. They showed this year they can go on a long playoff run. Adam Fox is young. They got guys like Kakko and Lafreniere who could take a step forward. Their blue line is so good and so young. And the Vezina Trophy winner, Igor Shesterkin's there as well. Why can they not take a step forward next year? And how? You cannot. There's no logical case for saying the Vegas Golden Knights have a better chance to win the Stanley Cup than the New York Rangers. That makes no sense.
No sense at all. Like, that's the thing. Like, Vegas is being so overvalued. Maybe it's because the Buckies are in Vegas. Yeah. Maybe that could be it. But the Rangers, like, you could easily say they should be number 2 on the list. Like, is that crazy to say? Like, I think they could be way better than Tampa Bay next season.
If they would have opened at plus 900 right next to Tampa, I would not have blinked twice. I would have been like, all right, makes sense.
No, like, and even Carolina being that high, they should be over Carolina 100%. Mm-hmm. Like, Carolina is a really good team. Don't get me wrong. And I guess like if Freddie Anderson was on that team, would they have beaten New York? Maybe, but they didn't at the end of the day. And now here we are with Carolina somehow still above him with all the question marks around like, can their stars get it done in the playoffs? They're probably going to lose Tony DeAngelo, who was a great offensive defenseman for them. Like Carolina is getting worse this offseason unless they go out and get a massive splash from, I don't even know where. They got to find a star apparently. And then New York is getting better because all their young players just went to the conference finals, won 2 games, and were just good throughout the playoffs. Like the argument seems very weak for New York not to be higher than they are.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming the Oilers are like the 6th best team in the West. I would assume, let me guess. So Colorado and Vegas are above them.
Yep.
Minnesota.
Yeah. They're next.
St. Louis.
They're next. Wow.
And then, is it the Oilers or are they the one after? Is there a team between them?
There's a team between St. Louis and Edmonton.
Oh, am I missed? Oh, Calgary.
Yeah. So it goes. Okay. So Vegas.
Calgary might lose Johnny Gaudreau, by the way. Still there.
Well, okay. So Vegas is 12-1, and then it goes to Minnie and St. Louis at 17-1. Minnie's losing Kevin Fiala. St. Louis 17-1. Calgary 18-1. Edmonton 19-1. So they're right there. Like they're pretty much the same odds, more or less. But the fact that Edmonton is lower than Calgary, the only question mark on the Oilers, I guess Evander Kane and goaltending, right? You don't know what's going to happen there. So if they don't get a goalie and they go into next year with like Scott Wedgwood and Stuart Skinner and Kane walks and they don't replace him, like, okay, they could be worse next year. Mm-hmm. Calgary might lose Johnny Gaudreau. They also still have to sign Andrew Mangiapane and Matt Tkachuk. There's a lot more question marks in Calgary than there are in Edmonton this offseason. Edmonton is bringing back their best players. Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl will be back next season and playing. You can't say that about Calgary.
Nope. And even Minnesota, you said Fiala.
Yeah.
Fleury's probably gone. They have no money to replace anybody. Like they're going to be worse. Yeah. St. Louis, Husso's gone. Is Binnington going to go back to his regular season form, or is he going to be playoff Binnington like he was? Well, there's a couple other question marks. And then Vegas, we already spoke about. Colorado, like they're going to be, they'll probably win again, to be honest. Like, do you think who would be your pick right now to win? Would you go back to Colorado?
Yeah. I think they're going to bring back Kadri. They'll let a couple of fringe pieces walk, but knowing Joe Sakic, he'll find ways to replace him. And I think they could get better goaltending next season. So
better, like with just Franzos and find someone else.
Yeah. Like I mean, Kemper was good. I like Kemper as a goalie too, but I don't know. What if they go out and what if they bring in Fleury and he finds a way to be better than Kemper? You know, I'm just saying, like, they could realistically get better in some areas is my point. And it's not a lock, obviously, that Fleury would be better than Kemper or anyone they get would be better than Kemper. But I think there's a shot that they improve their goaltending and the rest of their core pieces are all back.
Yep, I would agree. I think the NHL's in a weird spot right now. I think it's really hard to make a futures bet because maybe I'm just wrong, but I just don't think there's that many teams who can actually win. Like, I think there's a lot of teams, and I would even put the Oilers in this category, who are like fakers. Like, I think,
well, they're not on the Tampa, Colorado level.
Exactly. And I think the only team are the Rangers who can elevate to that next level. They're the only team I think that is like, okay, they could actually win. I just don't see any other team that has the pieces like that. Like even Florida, they don't have goaltending again, unless Spencer Knight becomes a star. Like he probably can, but besides that, like Toronto, we don't even know who the goalie is yet.
No. And
I think there's a lot of question marks.
The other thing too is it's a flat cap again, right? So the only teams that are really going to be improving are teams with money. Vegas has no money. Tampa has no money. The teams who can be most aggressive this year are pretty much all teams who are outside of the playoff picture. Colorado and Calgary have a ton of money, but a ton of free agents to sign. Mm-hmm. New Jersey, Ottawa, Detroit, Buffalo, LA. Those are the teams with a lot of money. But are there off-season moves that are going to make any of those teams cup contenders or even bring them up to that next tier? which is where you'd argue that Edmonton, St. Louis, Mini, Calgary, and those likes are Florida, Toronto. That's the next tier. I don't think there's moves that those teams I mentioned can make to get them into that tier. It'll make them playoff teams maybe. But again, I don't think there's some big, massive sleeper out there who's going to go have a stupid, huge monster offseason and suddenly be a cup contender next year. I think it's Colorado and Tampa versus the rest of the league. And the Rangers, they are the one team who can make a push into that tier next season, I think.
Yeah. And even those teams that you listed off, what was it? New Jersey, Detroit, Buffalo, Ottawa, just off the top of my head, like, which of these teams are even making the playoffs? The Atlantic, like three of those teams play in the Atlantic. Detroit, Ottawa, and Buffalo are all in the same division with Tampa Bay, Florida, and Toronto.
I think Boston. I think Boston could miss next year. I think Washington could miss next year.
Yeah,
no Backstrom.
Yeah, that's true. Backstrom gone.
He missed a lot of the year last year. Goaltending is a question mark. They're getting older, right? I could see my way too early. We don't know how the summer plays out. I wouldn't be surprised if the top of the Metro stays the same. Carolina, New York, Pittsburgh. Top of the Atlantic stays the same. Florida, Toronto, Tampa. And you get one of Buffalo, Detroit, or Ottawa, or New Jersey or the Islanders. Like two of those five, I think, could sneak in. Or it's just going to be a way closer race than at least it was this year, where it was like Christmas and we were like, all right, we know who the 8 are. Like, seal it up.
Yeah. Yeah, like that. I would agree with that. And then if you look over in the Pacific, I think the only team, well, Vegas, I guess. I think the Pacific will actually be a little tight this year because I think Vegas will obviously be a bit better. And also Vancouver.
Yeah.
You know, Vancouver, you think Vancouver could make that step into the playoffs too?
Yeah, they could.
I'm just thinking eventually they'll come out and there'll be bets where like, will this team make the playoffs or not? Like, I wonder if the Pacific will just become the Central this year where 5 teams make it. You know,
it could.
Yeah, that's kind of, I think that's something I'll look at when the odds come out. What team, the playoff odds, the odds to miss, like maybe a Wild miss. Maybe the Minnesota Wild just straight up miss the playoffs. I don't know. Like, is that division going to be good enough? Like, I think Dallas is going to be interesting too. Like, is Ossinger going to be able to do what he did for the playoffs for the season? Like, I don't know. Like, he's a good goalie. Like, even the depth on that team maybe isn't good enough yet. Like, I think there's a lot of question marks around the NHL on what teams are actually good and what teams aren't good. Like I said.
Okay, let's wrap this thing up by talking a little bit about what we're doing more recently or more immediately with our money. I'm going to give you my favorite thing to do tonight for the Toronto Blue Jays Boston Red Sox game. I've been on fire with my bet builders in this Jays Red Sox series. First game of the series, I hit a plus 130 that I had, kind of about half a unit on. And then I put a little sprinkle on a 16-1 bet builder that I shared in our Twitter community. Jays minus 1.5, Gosman 7+ Ks, Bichette and Chapman to both get a hit, Vladdy to hit a home run, Jays over 4.5 runs, and they hit it all. So that was a big win. And then last night I did Vladdy 2+ bases and Blue Jays win as well. Those both hit thanks to Vladdy's walk-off single. Tonight, this is the play. This is absolutely the play if you think the Jays are going to win. Blue Jays money line, Alek Manoah over 4.5 strikeouts. Blue Jays over 4.5 runs, plus 200. Lock it up.
I'm in. I like the Blue Jays bet builders.
Yeah.
It gives me a reason to be involved in the game. So shall we do a little BLT sandwich between the two of us?
Okay. BaggedMilk had to run. So sure. Between the two of us, what do you want to do?
I'm just going to go straight up Dodgers money line.
Okay. I like that.
Against the Rockies.
Yep.
So that's minus 200.
Minus 200. I will go. Where do I want to go with this one? I'm going to go Alek Manoah over 5.5 strikeouts. I think he's going to have a big game tonight.
Okay. So what does that get us to?
Plus 181.
There you go. That'll work.
That will work. Nice little plus 181 BLT sandwich to wrap up today's episode of the podcast. Shout out to our friends at PointsBet Canada. And shout out to you, Liam. That's going to do it for another episode. Talk to you next week.
See ya.